My guest is Jack Herschend, the co-founder and co-owner of Herschend Family Entertainment and Silver Dollar City. Jack, welcome.
Great to have the opportunity to get with you, Ken.
Well, it's so good to be with you. Silver Dollar City means an awful lot to people who live here in the Ozarks, but there's a lot more to Herschend Family Entertainment. Let's talk a little bit about you personally, though. How did you prepare to get into the family business? I know you went to Northwestern University.
I did. Getting in the family business was very easy, Ken, because there was hardly any business at all. And so Pete and I felt that we were so needed that it was easy. As an example, early on when we were in the cave business with Marvel Cave before there was a Silver Dollar City, I could erect a sign, highway sign, 8 by 20 feet for $18.75. If I went out in the woods and cut the cedar poles, if I painted the sign, if I erected the sign. And so it was just natural to say there were so many things that needed to be done. It was easy to volunteer and get busy.
So you were just plunging in and doing just about anything and everything yourself.
Very much so. And as a 17-year-old high school graduate, my father, who had to stay back in Chicago selling vacuum cleaners to put food on the table, told me that I was now in charge of our entire team of folks, which amounted to 4. And they were older, in their 30s, and big mistake to put a 17-year-old in charge of these guys. But it was an immediate immersion in the family business.
And when was that?
1950. My parents came to the Ozarks in '46. They were wildflower lovers, and the Ozarks has got a greater variety of wildflowers, Ken, than any place else in the United States. So they came here to hunt wildflowers, and they met and fell in love with the Lynch sisters, 2 old maids that had never married and had run the cave forever. And they were in their 70s, and they ended up leasing the cave from the Lynch sisters.
So you're in charge, but your dad's not even around.
Correct. We would talk on the telephone, and Mary had a real good business sense about her, and so she was very involved, and she would stay with Pete and myself at the cave, and we would just get to see Hugo on 4 or 5 trips that he would make to the cave throughout the year. You
were also in the military early in your life, in the Marine Corps, I believe. Yes. Give us a little bit of the chronology of being in the Marine Corps, of going to college, and then coming back to Silver Dollar City.
Well, I really didn't want anything to do with college, and I never thought about the military, but our dad had never been to college. He was a Dane, and he came to this country as an 18-year-old, and he wanted Pete and I to get a college education. And I convinced him, after a long argument, that I did not want to go to college. I wanted to stay and work at the cave. And so he very wisely, Ken, gave me a job of carrying sacks of cement from the entrance of the cave to the waterfall, where we were replacing wooden steps that rotted out every 2 years with concrete steps. And after 3 months of carrying sacks of cement 505 feet down in the cave, college sounded like a pretty good idea. So I was also a wrestler, and my wrestling coach said one day to the entire team, this evening after college, we're all going to go down and you're going to volunteer to go in the Marine Corps. And every guy on the wrestling team joined the Marine Corps.
Is that right?
Yes, as an 18-year-old.
That says something about the training in wrestling, doesn't it? You were good enough to be Marines.
We certainly had a strong-willed, opinionated wrestling coach.
So what was the experience in the Marine Corps like?
For sharing myself, in the June of '54, I graduated from college. We got married and we reported to the Marine Corps all in that 30-day period. And for sharing myself, it was like a honeymoon. The Korean War had just ended, and so I was not required to go overseas. We served in Quantico, Virginia on the East Coast, and then El Toro, California on the west, and we had just a great 2 years, and then I served another 10 years in the reserves.
Well, I have interviewed you before in the past, and in a previous interview, when we were talking about your philosophy at Silver Dollar City and even your other properties, you told me this. You said, "We stand for Christ." Mm. What does that mean?
Ken, thank you for asking the question, because I love to talk about it when it's appropriate. I believe in this day and age of relative truth, so many folks believe that whatever feels good is the truth. And they're really looking for some solid rock that they can know that really is the truth. And of course, Christ represents the truth. And so it was a joy in my life to know the difference. I was not a believer when Sherry and I married, and in a way, it was a great experience, because I understood what it was like not to have Christ in my heart, mm-hmm. and then to have Christ in my heart. And so hopefully we have lived out our careers with it being all about Christ and the truth that you find in Christ in the Scriptures.
How did you make that decision to come to Christ in your life?
Again, my wife has played a tremendous part in that. I came out of a non-believing family, and I watched Sherry and her strong faith. We had 3 sons, young boys, shortly when we were in our mid-20s. And every Sunday and every Wednesday, she would be in church. And to her great credit, Ken, she never pushed me. She never made me feel mm-hmm.
Somehow
inferior because I was not a believer. She would just invite me. And finally, it stuck, and I said, okay, I'll go with you. And then I met a traveling hardware salesman who witnessed to me for 2 years. I wanted proof. And he just was there for me Saturday after Saturday after Saturday. And right? Finally it made more sense to believe than not believe.
Wow. And you came to realize the truth of who Jesus Christ is.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's affected your lives, and what's followed, what's transpired mm-hmm. after that. You've talked a little bit about that, but how has that worked itself out in your life since then?
It's wasn't a coincidence, Ken, that within a month of my conversion, Pete also accepted Christ in a very different way and in a different church. So we got the opportunity in early on in Silver Dollar City, and as it started, to say, now what does our faith, how does it manifest itself in our business? And we said we ought to be a tasteful witness in our business, not just on Sundays and not just in where we volunteer, but it ought to be evident in our business. And so we set about to define tasteful witness. The cliche about it's better caught than taught mm-hmm. describes our efforts to have faith in the workplace be something that people see versus hear about.
Mm-hmm. Sherry and you have over the years been involved in a lot of different kinds of causes, both spiritual and otherwise. You're very devoted to your church, you're involved in the community. Education, I think, is something that's very important to you. Talk about some of these causes that have been important to you and how you've become involved.
When you mention education, I'm very proud of my brother Pete's commitment to education. He's now heads the state Board of Education, and that's where the education part fits, Ken. The first one that I'd like to describe is a passion for my wife, and it's called Nazareth Village. And what she and a group of folks here in this country did was raise money and then build a replica of Nazareth as it was at the time of Christ. And they have just done a magnificent job of giving people the opportunity to see where Jesus lived most of his life and what that was like. At the time of Christ, Nazareth was approximately 110 people. It's 500,000 now, but it was very small. And they built a synagogue and homes and pastures. And the thing that just thrills me is they have something called a parable walk. And people take an hour and a half to walk through Nazareth Village and walk out in the fields, and they give people the opportunity to understand why Christ would talk about, I'm the vine, you're the branches.
Yeah.
They talk about wheat and tares, and because, you know, these are things we all know about, we read about, but it really is significant when you can stand out there knowing that you're right at where Christ walked and understand why he talked about what he talked about. So Nazareth Village is a huge, huge thing that I just am so proud of Sherry for what she's done there. My passion has been mostly with youth. I'm involved in a ministry for troubled marriages that I love, called National Institute of Marriage. And Ken, they just do a phenomenal job of giving husbands and wives tools that can help them meet the other's needs. And it's very Christ-centered in its ministry, but they have saved 2,500 marriages and are growing, and I'm really proud of what they're doing in the to save marriages.
That's needed more than ever today, isn't it? Marriages are in trouble, aren't they?
Unfortunately, it is.
And to have Christian organizations like that can rescue marriages on a good, solid spiritual foundation is a powerful thing.
It is, and it's a joy to think about the kids that then grow up in a Christian home with a mom and a dad.
Yeah.
In that home.
Yeah, that's powerful. You've been involved in a lot of other things. We can't go into all of them. You're with Boys, I believe, Boys Ranch and
Lives Under Construction, Boys Ranch. Neat ministry. They take boys that no one else can handle, and through a very Christ-centered program, build a boy out of a troubled, angry young person, usually in lots of trouble with the law, into a Christian citizen that's going to do a great job of being a dad and a business person or be in ministry, and it's fun to watch. They take a troubled boy who's mad at the world, and usually for good reason, almost always a parental background to the problems he's having, and they have lots of rules, very strict, and when boys break a rule, there's a consequence. And in about 90 days, it occurs to a boy that his life would be much happier if he followed some rules rather than broke them. And then they start building his self-esteem on things that he's doing right. And usually within 6 months, boys accept Christ, and then you see hearts soften, and you know, now the boy's life blossoms.
Wow. Some people would say you've been a success, you've made some money in life, you can do just about anything you want, and why would you then choose to be involved in other people's lives like this?
Well, Ken, it sounds better than it really is. There's some selfishness involved in this. When I have a day where I get a chance to be involved in serving other people, it's a great day.
Wow.
When I'm self-centered and my focus is on me, it's not a real good day. It's a mediocre day. So I love the opportunities to serve in ministry mostly now, some in business, but mostly ministry, and it's the joy of my life.
And it should be the joy of Christians' lives, shouldn't it?
They're missing something if they aren't serving other people.
Yeah, that's really when you look at all of your successes. I would guess those successes in touching other lives might be way up above even your business successes.
One of our 3 objectives in our business, first one is having Christ at the center of our business, and the second one is a great place to work for great people. And this is a huge missionary field. We've got 10,000 folks involved in HFE, and when you get the opportunity to provide a tasteful witness, that's heartwarming.
And then the third point is
to make a profit, a return on the investment. In our business, the most frequently asked question is, what's new for next year? And without making a profit, there's no way that you can invest in another ride or another attraction or another special event. So profit is not a dirty word, but it's an absolute necessity in order to stay in business and to attract folks with new investment.
Yeah, definition of business, isn't it? And Christians and business do go together.
They do. They do. Well said.
Who are some of the interesting people you've met over the years? Celebrities, people from all sorts of walks of life have come into your life. I've seen some of the people who've come to Silver Dollar City. Who are some that stand out to you?
Just the most standout person in my whole business career is my wife. She is a phenomenal lady. I've already mentioned that she's a strong believer. She's the highest energy person I've ever seen, and she turned 80 last month. But just an incredible lady with a great Irish sense of humor, and so when I think of the people that really stood out in my life, the first one I think about is Sherry, and what a joy it's been to be married to her for 57 years. We talked about the 4 original employees that were at Marvel Cave when we arrived on the scene. And together the 4 had 7 years of education. So they were not educated people, but they had lots of just good common sense. And I mentioned earlier about being 17 and my father putting me in charge of these 4. I learned so much from these men. One time I called down, I no longer can remember what it was about, but I did it in front of the other 3. And Bert waited until we were alone. He said, I need this job, and I will work for you, but don't you ever criticize me in public. You do that in private. And so I learned things from these four men that I never learned at Northwestern University. So when I think about the folks that really touched me, it wasn't presidents Jimmy Carter or George H. Bush or George W. Bush, all of whom have been at Silver Dollar City. It really was those four.
Wow.
One more, if I might add
Yes.
one, and that is my mother-in-law. Fannibel was her name, and Fannibel loved horses. She hunted and just was a teenager's dream. I knew her as a 50-year-old. I didn't know she had a daughter until 6 months after we had gone hunting and fishing together and cave exploring. And I learned so much about the outdoors, about how to treat a lady. All came from my mother-in-law, who I loved.
Praise the Lord. Has your relationship with Christ and with your family helped you to get through some challenges in life? I'm sure not everything has been easy.
No, it hasn't, and I think the biggest opportunity for personal growth, Ken, has been through failures, and you just drive down Highway 76 and see the Grand Palace, which is closed and we built, and Celebration City, which is closed and we built, and those have been tough. But I think the Christian walk is one that you don't do alone, and people come alongside you and help you understand that the world hasn't ended, and that there's an enormous benefit to learning what went wrong so that you can be stronger in the future. Yeah. So that support from Christian friends, a Christian family, at the time of failures has really been significant for me.
Amen. Well, one final question. What would you say to the young person who might be in the same situation as you were before you received Christ and might be watching this interview about
What
Christ?
A great question. Thank you for the opportunity. Ken, there's a belief out there I'd like to dispel first, and that is, as I listen to young business people that I get a chance to interface with, they ask about Christian faith in the workplace as if it was going to be a liability, as if they were going to have to sacrifice some part of their success in order to live a Christ-like life. And it's just the opposite. It's an asset.
Wow.
People, not so long ago, I had a person who was not a believer, and we were having lunch in the employee lounge, and he said, you know, I'm not a person of faith, but I'd a whole lot rather work in a Christian environment than not. And so,
wow,
whoa,
that
so,
says a lot.
Yeah, so the point of that sharing that is that people of faith and people who have not come to faith yet all love the idea of being in a Christian environment. And so your faith is not a liability, it's an asset. And just think of it as an asset rather than a liability.
Jack, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
My guest has been Jack Herschend, co-owner and co-founder of Herschend Family Entertainment and Silver Dollar City.